Hey everybody, welcome to Grimsforge Gaming. Today we're going to be giving you an update to our Dreadcaller 2.0 Stamina Sorcerer build. And you'll want to pay attention to the time frame if you're watching this video looking for Stamsorc builds. Blackwood just dropped and the new CP changes are kind of throwing the world for a loop as far as ESO goes, because nobody really knows where the meta is at and some things might change on this. But let's take a look at the build here and then jump into the CP and I'll explain some major changes. So first things first, we are not running a mythic setup on this. The reason being is we just simply don't have the room. I'm actually running two separate arena weapons, and so that's where we'll start out. The first thing that we're running on our front bar is going to be the Maelstrom Maul, and you can see that we've got it Nirnhoned. And because I spent a lot of time down in Imperial City, a lot of the mobs down there are undead or Daedra, plus there's a lot of pesky werewolves that run around, so this enchantment does a really good job against them. And you can see down at the bottom, dealing damage with a crit charge causes enemies to bleed for 11,000 over 5 seconds. So the bleed pressure from this is pretty heavy. Now, if we're going to initiate a fight, so we see somebody and we want to get the jump on them, we're going to do that with the Master's Bow. And we're going to get our caustic arrow by hitting them with a poison injection or venom arrow, depending on whichever way you want to go. It doesn't matter. But you can see that we also have the weapon damage enchant, and so that's almost 350 extra weapon damage for the first 5 seconds that you're engaging someone. Now, I can tell you this. If you want to spend the transmute crystals instead of going sharpened on this, there's no real need to be sharpened on your Master's Bow. It would be better as infused, and that would drive up your enchant. Okay, you'd have a higher tooltip on, or a higher total weapon or spell damage on that enchant. And so that will be the way to go if you want to push another 150 weapon damage out of the build. So because we're running the two arena weapons, we're not able to fit a mythic item on this build, and so what we went with is the very first set is going to be Unleashed Terror. Unleashed Terror is a dungeon set. You can get that. It'll take a considerable amount of farming probably, but at the dungeon, I can't think of the dungeon right now, Castle Thorn I believe it's called. Yeah. So anyways, Unleashed Terror, 2-piece is going to be weapon damage, 3 pieces max stand, 4 pieces max stand, and then the 5-piece when you deal direct damage with a leap or a charge, leap, teleport, or pull ability, you cut your enemy, causing them to bleed for 10 seconds, dealing 21,000 bleed damage over the duration. And so you pair that 21,208 with the 11,034 damage. That's just a metric ton of bleed damage, right? We've got over 30,000 bleed damage there. So against a player character, just by crit charging to them, we're going to put a 15k bleed on them. A lot of pressure. Now the next set that we've paired Unleashed with is going to be Briarheart. Briarheart, 2 pieces weapon critical, 3 pieces max stand, 4 pieces weapon critical, 5-piece. When you deal critical damage, you increase your weapon damage by 445 for 10 seconds. While this effect is active, your critical strikes heal you for 358 health for 15 seconds. I can tell you this, that as soon as we engage on someone, we will almost always trigger Briarheart because we are engaging with someone with crit surge, right? After we hit them with our poison, our caustic arrow, our poison injection to get this weapon damage buff going, the caustic arrow at the bottom, and so it's a light attack and a caustic arrow or lethal arrow. We'll get both of those, okay? And that's like 700, 800 weapon damage right there. Then we switch to our front bar and we crit rush them, and the crit rush will put that dot on them, it'll put that dot on them, and it's also a guaranteed critical strike, which will trigger this weapon damage and heals for the next 10 seconds. And so this whole setup synergizes really well together. It will push 7,000 weapon damage, and I'll show you a screenshot of that right now with it buffed up, but 7,000 weapon damage. Pretty nice. Now, I'm going to hover over each piece just so you can see what we have where. At the end of the day, both of these armor sets are medium armor, so it doesn't matter where you get what. As far as jewelry, as far as armor pieces, it doesn't even matter. So just get it together in any fashion you can. I can tell you it's probably a better idea to make your jewelry one thing and your helm and shoulders another, just for the sake of moving armor around, stuff like that, and mixing and matching armor sets. But at the end of the day, if you just want to put this build together and keep it on somebody, it doesn't matter. But hovering over things, you can see that we have the multi-enchantment effect, the prismatic defense on there. And the only ones I don't have that on, max stam and max stam there. I normally put the prismatic enchants on everything, so, but for some reason I didn't on those two, but it's whatever. This also says infused. I could probably spin the transmute crystals. Let's talk about that for a second. It used to be pre-Blackwood that Impen was fairly important. However, because of the current situation with the champion points, you can't have it all at this point, and we'll talk about that when we start looking at the champion points. And because you can't have it all unless somebody specifically puts CP into crit chance and crit damage, crit chance basically just fell off the side of the earth. It's not even a thing now. So you can come off of Impen on almost all your gear, most likely. I think this is the meta that we're going into, and I will be changing all of my gear to reinforced because of where we're at right now. We cannot drive the same numbers that we used to be able to drive, as far as having great healing, having great resistances, and having great tooltips. You have to choose between one of those three for the most part, or run a combination of all and be less effective in any given field, if that makes sense. So let's buff up here real quick, and we'll kind of explain that just for a second. Also, just to show you that 7k weapon damage here, we're just bing. There's our 7,000. Okay. So 7,000, no problem. Let's jump into this. 1784 stamina recovery, much better than before. 11,000 health recovery, 930 magic recovery. Our recoveries are way better than they were on the previous iteration of the build. Our weapon damage is way better too. It went from 5,500 weapon damage on the first iteration of the build to now we're over 7k weapon damage. Our physical penetration's roughly about the same on this build. Our weapon critical took an absolute nosedive. So this build, the exact same build with the old champion point tree, had 47% crit chance. Okay, we've only got 23% crit chance now, and so there that is. Another thing too is our crit resistance took a nosedive. Our crit resistance was almost 3k, now it's only 2,000. Okay, our resistances were at 20,000 in the last patch, and now our resistances are only 17,000. So we lost 3k resistances across the board. Our D-Swing does have a 14k tooltip still, so that's good. Our Dawnbreaker hits harder now. Our Dawnbreaker previously had a 16k upfront damage and then 17k dot. Our Dawnbreaker now does 18k upfront damage with a 23k dot. And then our Vigors are doing the same thing. It's a 20k Vigor tooltip. And so, anyways, there are some differences in the build as far as how they play out. That's all of that. We don't need to jump in. You can see we're running Crit Surge, D-Swing, Executioner, and Streak. And then right now we have bound armaments. I can tell you, if you were going to potentially change some abilities around on it, there is some flex to it. Some people actually like to run crystal weapon. I've played around with it a little bit. I'll have to play around with it a little bit more on a two-hand setup. It just doesn't feel very fluid to me yet, but there is a activate your crystal weapon, crit charge to a target, hit him with a light attack into a D swing, and it's a lot of damage. And so I'm going to have to play around with that combo a little bit more. If I end up adding that to my bar, we're going to take bound armaments off. But right now, bound armaments is real easy. Just activate it and then fight. And during your regular rotation, you're building up these stacks, and then just let them all go. Activate it again, and it'll hit the target multiple times. That seems to be working out much better for me. Also, while slotted, your max stamina is increased by 8%, your light attacks deal 10% more. That's not too bad. So this is a nice way to go, plus there's some additional passives, I'm sure, for having that on the bar. But if you want that crazy burst potential, crystal weapon will be the way to go. You can see it's got a 10k tooltip, and we're not, it's level 1 right now, so that would be a great complement to the D swing. So that is one flex. Take this and drop it there. I think the other flex is going to be, right now I'm running Swarming Scion on my back bar. I think this is probably the smarter play to have this on my bar instead of the Bow Ultimate Toxic Barrage. Unbuff Toxic Barrage, or I guess we can buff up and take a look at it, but it's going to have a nice tooltip, 73, almost 74,000 damage up front, and then another 40,000 dot damage over the next 8 seconds. The pressure with this is amazing, and you might want to run with this when we were werewolves running all over the place last patch or whatever. I think werewolves and everybody as a whole are going to be much squishier this patch, and everyone's weapon damage is potentially going to be higher. So killing people should not really be a problem moving forward. Even the heavy armor builds are not hitting cap penetration or cap resistances at this point. So if you're running into werewolves and you have a hard time getting them out, this is the play. But most of the time, because our resistances are so low on this build, hitting Swarming Scion and kind of becoming a big monstrous bully is a better play. So just hit that, and for 20 seconds you can go ham. So, but that is a flex spot for you if you choose. You can see we're still leveling Poison Arrow because, like I said, I normally run Bombard on this, so I have a hard CC with Streak, and then I have an immobilization with Bombard. But because we have the Master's Bow, we need the Caustic Arrow. Let's jump into the CP. First off, Green Tree is, for the most part, a throwaway. I mean, it's personal preference here. I have to say that War Mount and Gifted Rider are probably the two best traits to get here, and the next one, or this one, Steed's Blessing, because you can get this one right at the very beginning. Increasing your out of combat movement speed by up to 20%. So I would drop your first 50 points into that and throw that right up onto your bar. Next thing is, on your way to getting this one right here, Treasure Hunter's probably the second best, or I would say the least most impressive for me. You know, these three right here are the most important, and so you can see the allotment on that is going to require just under 300 CP for this field. So you at least need to be 600 CP or better total, 900 CP to achieve this setup, okay, roughly. And so, but anyways, War Mount, improve your mastery with mounts, removing all mount stamina cost outside of combat. That's great. Increase your movement speed by 2%, mount speed, sorry, by 2%. So that gives us another 10% additional mount speed. And then I've got increase your quality of items you find in treasure chests, and increase your out of combat movement speed by 20% total. Okay. And the route that I took was just starting here for fall damage. I didn't need to put all 50 points into that. I could actually get some points back and put them into some passives places that and I'll just have to play around with that. This is in as far as the unslottable sections, this is not min maxed just yet, but these will remain my slottables for sure. Okay, so I'll have to play around with the rest, but these are going to stay. Let's look at the next one. This is the most important one right here, and I can tell you this about champion points. I'm going to be updating all my builds because all of my builds have changed drastically when you look at them in regards to CP. So first thing that happens when I come here to the middle tree is I'm going to drop 50 points in Untamed Aggression. This is both. I'm going to do that for both Magicka and Stamina. Okay, and then that's going to drop onto my bar first thing. The thing about these two are these are not slottable. You just get the bonus from them. So if you have the extra points, I would put the extra 40 points into these and pick up an extra 1,000 max stam and an extra 1,000 max stamina and Magicka. Then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to go into Extended Might, and we're going to drop 40 points into Offensive Penetration. And because we're a stamina class, we go to the right. Increase your chance to apply martial status effects by 60%. Sounds great. And then increase your weapon and spell damage by 100. And so that's the new Mighty passive, which is pretty underwhelming, but make sure that you at least get this and this. Get this to 40 and get this to 30 so you actually get this. And if you need to put the minimum in here or of 20, you can and save yourself 20 points. So just through getting that, none of these are slottable. You can't grab them and pull them up there, so I'm just going to have that passively 100 extra weapon damage, and I'm going to have this extra 1400 pen from that, and an additional 60% chance to increase crit. And so you can see those in the purple tree. This is a point dump for me. We'll look at it there at the very end. Next thing I do, since I went here, I put points into max stam, not slottable. This is just unslottable passive, and then I put points in here. Now I can reach up here. These are very important. If you do not put points into these, your tooltips will be less in Blackwood than they were in the previous patch. So figure out what type of damage type that you have and put points into those. And because I have single target, which is going to be my D-swing, my executioner, that's how I'm able to drive those points up. Now if I wanted to drive up Thaumaturge and get my Dawnbreaker dot to be even more, or if I wanted the dot on Toxic Barrage to be even more, or I'll have to look and see how they're listing Hurricane right now, if it's considered pulse direct damage or if it's considered damage over time, but it's probably pulse direct damage, I'd have to say. But anyways, if I wanted to drive up my damage over time, I'd drop points in Thaumaturge, and if I wanted to drive up the initial burst, the initial damage from my Dawnbreaker, I'd put points into this. So these are very important, and so that's why you can see the first thing was I got that extra weapon and spell damage, and I increased my total damage by single target abilities by 10%. Now that we're finished up there, I went over here, just put the bare minimum into crit chance. Here's the thing, I have 1300 CP, and I'm not able to have it all in the new champion point system, and I think that's a good thing. When I look at my old build and I look at what I am right now, this is really going to cause people to think about what they want to be when they grow up. And so I only put 10 points in a crit chance, and I knew that I wanted this. When you deal direct damage, you heal for 7% of the damage done. So if you've run with a mythic ring with a pale order, the mythic ring, this kind of adds to that, right? Any direct damage. So every time I crit charge, every time I D-swing, every single one of those little daggers that come off of that one ability, they all heal me. And so that's pretty cool. And then I picked up another 165 weapon damage with Wrathful Strikes. And so those are my slottables. The only thing here is this. I'll always run with this. I'll always fill this depending on my damage. Okay, those are a must right there. And in order to get to this, you're probably going to have to go through here, right? I think you might be able to start here too, so that kind of depends. But I'm always going to fill this properly with the pen and whatever weapon damage, and I'm always going to at least have one of these damage types addressed up here, which will probably be this on most of my builds. Okay, so this is always going to be a slottable. This is always going to be a slottable for the most part. These are always filled. This is flex. I don't have to always do this if I don't want to, but most of the time direct damage builds, you might as well. More healing is great. And then this will always be a must. So must flex one of these will always have a point up there. That's how I'm doing it right now. Now, here's another thing. I do have an extra 4% healing. Here's this. Everything that I have right now is put into weapon and spell damage, or receiving more heals. There's more damage, or receiving 7% healing from my direct damage done, and more weapon damage. I'm very damage oriented on this build, right? I want to initiate the fight. I want to put my bleed on them with crit charge, untamed, or terror, and unleash terror, and the maelstrom maul. Like, I start the fight, I apply pressure, and that's where I'm going. Now, if you don't put your CP like this, then you'll spend a significant amount of time here. But we're not going to see the numbers that we used to see in champion points moving forward. And the reason being is, even if I put all 40 points into this, the maximum amount that I'm going to get is like an extra 4. Look, it says 1%. Reduce the damage you take from martial attacks by 1% for every level. I can get 4% damage mitigation to physical, disease, poison, and bleed damage. 4% damage mitigation, you know? And so I just don't think that's worth the investment anymore. This was just a point dump for me, okay? It's just not worth the investment. And so what we're going to see in this meta moving forward, when you look at my stats and you think this build is crap, we're going to see builds coming out like this. They're not hitting resistance caps. They're not hitting the crit numbers that they used to. Their weapon damage will be more. Their recoveries will be more. And that's just going to be the new meta, I have to say. Anyways, let's move on. Over here, it's kind of a grab bag of different things. I think for the most part, unless I'm running a unique type build, I'm always going to go with rejuvenation. You can run with that right out the gate. So drop your first 50 points into that. It's going to give you an extra 150 health, magic, and stamina recovery. That's why my recoveries are better on this build than they were previously. And you can see that I have 50 points into Bloody Renewal. Restores 1500 stamina every time I kill an enemy. So I plan on killing a lot of enemies, so there's 15k stamina coming in. Plus I did the same for Magicka. There's 1500 Magicka and 1500 stamina coming in. That's a really nice sustain. And then the other thing I have is survival instincts. While afflicted with a status effect, your core combat costs 5% less per stage. So my core combat skills cost 25% less. Now, what I'm trying to figure out, and this is the big unknown that we've been talking to people about so far, is what in the heck is core combat skills? Is that my break free? Is that my dodge roll? Is that my block? Or is that my abilities, my core combat abilities that are on my bar? Okay, my actual class abilities and weapon skills, combat skills. Is it my weapon skills, my class skills? What is this? So we're trying to figure this out, but a 25% cost reduction is pretty cool. So also on a Stamsorc, I don't have a cleanse. The likelihood that I'm going to be suffering from a status effect is pretty high. And so I'll be, whatever my core combat skills are, I'm going to be looking at a 25% cost reduction to perform those. So there's that. You have a couple cool unslottable things on this tree, which are nice. Increase your movement speed when sprinting by 8%. I dropped 32 points into that. And reduce the cost of sprint by 20, or the cost of sprint is reduced by 60s. That's cool. That's not a slottable. I got 50 points here, so reduce the duration of elemental status effects applied to you by 25%, and reduce the cost of dodge roll by 360. Great, because we're using a bow on our back bar, so we'll be dodge rolling often. And reduce the cost of break free by 440. So, more than likely on every one of my builds, we're always going to have this. I'm always going to have these two things, and then this last one is going to be figuring out if this is worth it or where else we need to go on here. But definitely these, okay? And I do have on one of my other builds, instead of running with this, we have this on my sorcerer. Reason being, on my sorcerer, I sit on my ultimate. I don't need my ultimate to kill people, and so on my sorcerer currently I have between 3 and 4k health recovery, and it's crazy. So we'll come to that whenever I update that build. But there it is. That's Dreadcaller 2.0, but updated to Blackwood and the new CP changes. So hopefully everybody be safe out there. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments below. And if there's another one of my builds you want to see an update on sooner rather than later, leave a comment in the messages below, and I'll work on that one next for you. So be safe out there. Bye.